Hello, James. First of all, let me say that I very much enjoy our intellectual contest. And let's be frank, it is a contest, though it's one in which there's no single absolute judge. Each witness will judge for herself or himself. But the contest is that you claim the non-contradiction principle was an example of a final answer, leaving no questions to ask, or perhaps no questions as to its truth. Now, clearly, I have raised questions. You've discussed those questions, okay? But presumably, you see those questions as trivial or rhetorical, and they're created in the same sense that you can really create a question out of words, about anything. But you must see those questions as empty, or else you would accept that I've already proven that there are more questions. So if we refine the question we would debate then into the question of, is the law of non-contradiction absolute? And we seem to agree that this means that absolute means something applies in all reference frames. So the contest for me is to demonstrate that at least in one case it doesn't apply, or ideally in several cases. Okay, I do have several examples that I've told you in which it does not apply. But in this introduction, because I plan to make several videos on this subject, going through these things one by one, including some new examples of how my thinking works on this. But in this introduction, I wanted to say there's a perspective that's driving me to create these examples and discover these examples. And, so that if you were to, totally prove that all my examples, that I've made mistakes in them, I would still seek to create new examples due to this perspective. And the perspective is a view into why nothing is absolute, and it's because all things are true only within certain frames of reference. This is a key in relativism of any sort, that things are only true relative to a particular frame of reference. Maybe more than one frame of reference, but still, when you're judging their truth, you can't not say the frame of reference, which as we do in absolute statements. We leave out the frame of reference because it applies in all frame of reference. And I believe there's nothing like that. And there's various arguments at this level of epistemology that can be applied to everything, but it's somewhat more interesting to go through case by case and something very difficult like the law of non-contradiction or mathematical truths to show why those still are not absolute, even though they might be absolutely true in the tautological sense, in the same way that all bachelors are male, because by definition that they're male. So when you make your standard attack, this is a very standard attack, that when I say there are no absolutes and you say that that's an absolute, then you ought to think more carefully about the definition we've just agreed on about what it means to be absolute. Because it's different. To prove that something is incoherent and therefore can't possibly apply in any case because it's incoherent, like absolutes or omnipotence or other self-contradictory ideas, is not the same as proving something applies in all reference frames. You see, I've said a reference frame is poorly built, that assuming the reference frame, you can conclude the opposite. You can conclude that the reference frame doesn't apply. So assuming it applies, you can prove it can't apply. Then that's different than trying to say this reference frame applies in all these infinite reference frames that you can't even enumerate and which are infinite, So even without the law of non-contradiction, we demonstrate the valuelessness of something that leads to its own contradiction. If assuming something is true leads to the conclusion that that same thing is false, then the law of non-contradiction does not apply, because it's not A and it's not A. But it does prove that the thing is incoherent, and it's not true and it's not false, in the sense that, yes, to be true means that you can't also be false. To be false means you can't also be true. If something leads paradoxically to its own negation, then it's incoherent. We haven't had to adopt the law of non-contradiction to say that, okay, because we're not really saying that it's true and false. We're saying that if I assume it's true, it leads to its false, and this is a concept of incoherence. It's different than saying, well, two opposite contradictory states might actually coexist, like in the case of quantum mechanic superposition. So to show that something cannot be can be done within its frame of reference. So within the sphere of the frame of reference we've assumed, and I can work in that sphere. That's okay in relativity. Adopt a frame of reference, see what you conclude. If I adopt absolute frame of reference and find out that nothing can be absolute, that's different than proving some truth is absolute. Okay, process of elimination is different from a process of assertive truth. Example outside of the absolute, I just mentioned omnipotence. If I show that omnipotence, if I can show that omnipotence cannot be, since the omnipotent can't create a stone too heavy for the omnipotent creature to lift, then I've proven that nothing can be omnipotent, because to be omnipotent means to not be omnipotent. And I've done this from within its own frame of reference. Then that's the same sense that I'm saying things cannot be absolute. Now, I do value the law of non-contradiction. I'm very logical. I'm not someone trying to say, I'm not someone trying to say that we live in some world of dreams and where free will is magical or something. I believe in non-contradiction. I use it as a criteria, but sometimes it does not apply. When we see a paradox, it does not apply. To me, that means, yes, I should fix this logic so that it can apply. Okay, but that means it doesn't apply in some cases. And it's not clear that it will actually be possible to sort things always so that it doesn't apply. And what I really think is that, yes, we can take things that are paradoxical. We can learn a better way of looking at them so that the law of non-contradiction can apply. And this is something we do because it's useful for us in thinking. But it will always leave other things in which the law of non-contradiction does not yet apply. And things like quantum mechanics make some argument that there are actual basic material processes and phenomena to which it won't ever apply. So I value this idea of non-contradiction obviously in the way that I've said we can prove a frame of reference incoherent, but that is not actually the same thing as the law of non-contradiction. The law of non-contradiction, as you stated it, having to do with that if A, then not A, whereas that doesn't apply to paradoxical statements, but those paradoxical statements are still incoherent. So next, I think I'm going to talk about color, and then I plan to get into the examples I gave you in my first video, which I don't think we've exhausted the true meaning of those examples. Thanks.